To come on so we can talk to him about all the shenanigans going on in the state. Hey there, Rob.
Hey there, Todd. My favorite thing, shenanigan discussion.
Shenanigans. It's a great word, isn't it?
No doubt about it.
And it is the brand of Connecticut politics. Listen to this. I don't know if you heard Mayor Ganem responding to the...
I know what everyone else knows from watching the videos, whether it's overzealous, whether it's ignoring rules. I don't know.
He's been in office for most of the 21st century, and he says he only knows what he saw in the videotape.
Yeah, right. Sure. Todd, I got my first wish, which was that, this type of activity would become widely known and understood by the public. But I need a lot more wishes to come true. You got a genie hanging around?
Well, but this is a good start, I mean, I don't know how much legs it has because Republicans seem generally reluctant to make big noise about stuff like this. But this is really a national story because Democrats like to deny that there's any problem with elections as they keep making the laws looser and making those ballots more accessible to anyone to cheat with. And now they're getting busted on it. And now there's videotape. Right.
And that's exactly correct. But the thing we need next is for the public to make the leap from understanding that this activity is occurring, particularly in Connecticut and maybe in other places across the country. Although I think that this is a Connecticut-specific problem in many ways because of the way our Connecticut politicians have put together our election laws.
They've leaned into it, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is all done on purpose. And Mayor Ganem and the Secretary of State and the governor of the state and so on, they're acting when they pretend that they don't know about this activity. They know completely and full well that this is going on, and they are enabling it. They've all enabled it over the years because it benefits them, and they know it. And I've called them out repeatedly year after year for doing so. And they've always mocked me, oh, yeah, Senator, you're more likely to be struck by lightning than find voter fraud in Connecticut. This is the kind of commentary because they could never get enough evidence, enough documentation, and enough, smoking gun like this to make it happen. But now I need people to realize that this is happening not just because of the Wandas of the world, but because of the Democrat politicians that put the policies in place for this to happen. They need to make that connection, and then they need to make the next connection after that, which is that myself, Representative Mastro-Francesco, and a few other people have been sounding the alarm on this for a decade. We've called them out. We've offered amendments and bills and challenged them in the public view in front of the press, and nothing has happened. They just mock us. They disregard it. And even as recently as September 26th, which was the special session, and after the Bridgeport video was out, we had a special session at the state legislature, and we addressed these election issues, and I offered 5 amendments in a row. Get rid of drop boxes, number 1. Nice to see Mayor Ganem is on my side with that issue now. Number 2, get rid of drop boxes just in Bridgeport, at least until the investigation is over. Stop the mailing of absentee ballot applications, which shouldn't exist. Add security protocols like signature verification and that kind of thing. And I don't know, there's one more. But, penalties, actual real life significant penalties for people that commit acts of election fraud. And you know what? The Democrats voted down all 5 amendments on a party line. They mocked me for my, inference that this is a larger problem than just 2 or 3 votes, which is what they claimed it was at the time. Well, it looks like she might have a few pieces of paper. We're finding out now that 3 times as many votes were cast via drop boxes than were people showing up there. The level of fraud is shocking.
Well, that's what the court called it.
Right, and it is. And if people think this is not happening in the whole state, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. It is happening everywhere. Now, it's probably not happening on the scale that it's happening in a Democrat primary in Bridgeport. But if you think that the new policies that the Democrats have put in place over the last decade, opening up mail-in voting and eliminating security protocols and protections, have not enabled similar types of fraud, even very simple one vote here or there, people voting for their kids that are away in school or voting for their parents that are elderly and not inclined to vote on their own. That kind of thing is happening. And there are elections being decided by small margins. Right in Southington last year, my friend Toni Morrison lost an election to a Democrat by 1 vote.
Wow.
And that could be the difference.
Yeah, people have to get mobilized. There's no doubt about it. But I view this as the kind of thing that if it can be pumped up enough and pushed around enough and repeated enough, that will let people see the obvious. Because to me, it's always been clear, and you're kind of soft pedaling the degree to which this might exist anywhere, but to me, it has to exist in lots of places because of the amount of energy and focus Democrats have put into softening the election laws. And there's really no big incentive for voters. Voters like having flexibility for a few days so that they're not locked into a single day. But there's nothing that says you have to have this big program where everybody is being encouraged to vote a different way. That's being grabbed out of thin air as some big benefit to people, but it's not necessarily. There's a few people who need an absentee ballot, and the rest of us can just go vote when it's time to vote.
Right. Well, I mean, the Democrats know how the world works, and they know that informed voters, people that are inclined to vote because they're following what's going on in their state or local government, and they're paying attention, they are more likely to vote Republican. And they know that. So their only answer is to drive the turnout of less informed voters, low information voters, Rush Limbaugh used to call them. And that's what they try and do. And that's why you see this more prevalent in the cities, because that's where you're going to have more people that are inclined to vote for Democrats. If you can just turn them out, or you can, there's less, Republican oversight going on there, particularly in a Democrat primary. I mean, you can go on and on about the reasons, but it's all because they know that pushing the ballots in front of people is more likely to end up with Democrat votes than Republican votes, and not because of winning on the merit of arguments, but because they have a better ground game. The whole Democrat Party is got a structure that's based in people that rely on the Democrat Party's success to keep their checks coming, and that means whether they're state employees or they work for a nonprofit or they're on some sort of entitlement. Those people absolutely need Democrats to stay in power to keep their checks flowing, and the Democrats love that symbiotic relationship. Republican voters are generally, self-sustaining, hardworking, independent people, and they just want to be left alone so they can earn their money and keep the government out of their life and their back pocket.
Our guest is Rob Sampson, state senator from Wolcott. What is the history? Around the country in big cities, there have been there's this history of these tough guy, ward boss style dictatorship governments in urban areas where they really got it all organized and they know how to deliver votes, and that's morphed, I think, over time into this. Into a more modern model, but the idea of the schemes and the total control has always been there. Is that your view? Yes, absolutely. What's complicated these days is that the Democrat Party is actually quite divided internally. They're a lot better at disguising that to the public, unlike Republicans, where we're throwing stones at each other every day. But there is a battle between the old-style Democrats, of which Ganim is definitely a part of that crew, and the new, more progressive, particularly minority candidates who are trying to move them out of these positions. And that's what you're witnessing in Bridgeport is the push and pull of those two groups against one another, fighting for superiority in controlling the city of Bridgeport. So Gomes represents this. Gomes represents in Bridgeport the challenger to Ganim. He represents that left wing of the party fighting to get more minority representation and more radicalism into the government. And Ganim is old school ward boss, tough guy, mayor kind of management. That's the way I see it. Yes. And I don't know what we're better off with. But one thing I can tell you is I'd like to have a fair election. And the people that are living in Bridgeport, they deserve to have a fair election, too.
one of the most shocking things that has happened in this whole process, Todd, is that during that special session, when I spoke for about an hour and a half on the floor and basically, went through everything that happened in detail and talked about the video and, what's been going on and the law changes that have led to this. And, we can go on for many hours about that conversation. But it's, as you said, they've opened up absentee ballot voting to the point where there is almost no integrity or security to the process at all. And I went through all that and offered my amendments. And then after that, the Democrats got up one by one to make their closing arguments. And each one of the city Democrats, particularly minority Democrats, got up and suggested that somehow my amendments and my arguments were designed to suppress the vote of minorities. It's insane. They're defending the white mayor of Bridgeport who's being challenged by a minority Democrat candidate. It's Democrat on Democrat violence for one thing, and it's the minority candidate who ended up
who's being suppressed
losing the election, who's being suppressed, and they tried to make this argument, and including Marilyn Moore, who was the last candidate
4 years ago
Gomes' position.
Yeah,
she was in the exact same position as Gomes 4 years ago, and she made the case on the floor that more election security is a bad thing.
She's a state senator who suffered the same sort of insult that is now happening with Gomes in Bridgeport. So Marilyn Moore ran 4 years ago. She's a state senator, and she wouldn't support your attempts to strengthen the election laws. Wait, what do you think motivates that?
Yeah, well, I think that the Democrats will stick together even under the most unbelievable, circumstances like this where they're going at each other before they would side with Republicans or side with good public policy.
Yeah, do what's right.
Yeah, and that's because, they may realize that they're being hurt individually by these policies in these isolated circumstances. But what they also think is that they benefit from this much more when they're battling Republicans across the state and across the country, and they're not willing to give that up.
But the benefit might be that they don't have to suffer repercussions for challenging their own party?
I think there definitely are repercussions. There is a real fight going on in Bridgeport and elsewhere around the state between Democrats internally. And we see it in its capital, too. I mean, the Black and Puerto Rican caucus holds a lot of power up there. They prevent things from happening. They force things to happen on a regular basis. And there's a constant battle for supremacy about who's, driving the bus of the Connecticut Democrats.
But there is a sort of artificial delay because of Ned and his wealth, I think, and the casualness with which he can buy an election that has delayed the takeover of the more radicalized Democratic Party. That's the radical extreme left anti-American Democratic Party portion is now in charge of the Democratic Party, but they don't get to have that role in Connecticut. But it's going to come on like a storm, isn't it?
I don't know that I would agree. I find Ned Lamont to be pretty darn progressive. I mean, he may not be AOC, but he's not far off. He's certainly not a moderate Democrat by any stretch of the imagination. And